I'm Nana Gagua, and I will be talking about a famous book, Catcher in the Rye by Jd Salinger. I'm sure most of you have read it, but this time I'm discussing the book in a social and historical context. The lecture is a part of the course of American literature for juniors. This is a quote from the book. "I'd just be the catcher in the rye and all. I know it's crazy, but that's the only thing I'd really like to be. I know it's crazy." It says a lot about the character and the author of the book. Jeremy David Salinger was born in New York City in 1919. The son of a wealthy cheese importer, Salinger grew up in Manhattan and spent his youth being shuttled between the various prep schools before his parents finally settled on the Valley Forge Military Academy in 1934. He graduated from Valley Forge in 1936 and attended a number of colleges, including Columbia University, but did not graduate from any of them. While at Columbia University, he took a creative writing class in which he excelled. He was interested in writing. His first short story was published in 1930. He continued to write as he joined the army and fought in Europe during World War II. In 1951, he published his only full-length novel, Catcher in the Rye. He wrote a lot of short stories, which were published as books. They were called 9 Stories and Franny and Zoe. The Catcher in the Rye is set around the 1950s and is narrated by a young man named Holden Caulfield. Holden is not specific about his location while he is telling the story, but he makes it clear that he is undergoing treatment in a mental hospital. The events he narrates take place in the few days between the end of the fall school term and Christmas, when Holden is 16 years old. The main character and protagonist is Holden Caulfield. He is narrator of the novel. Holden is a 16-year-old junior who has just been expelled for academic year from a school called the Pansy Prep. Although he is intelligent, sensitive, Holden narrates in a cynical and jaded voice. He finds that hypocrisy and ugliness of the world around him almost unbearable, and through his cynicism, he tries to protect himself from the pain and disappointment of the adult world. Oakley and Stradlater are his neighbors. Oakley is his next-door neighbor, and Stradlater is roommate. Jane Gallagher, a girl with whom Holden spent a lot of time one summer when their family stayed in neighboring summer houses in Maine. Jane never appears in The Catcher in the Rye, but she's extremely important to Holden because she is one of the few girls whom he both respects and finds attractive. Phoebe Caulfield. Phoebe is Holden's 10-year-old sister, whom he loves so much. Ollie Caulfield, Holden's younger brother, his dad. D.B. Caulfield, Holden's older brother. D.B. wrote a volume of short stories that Holden admires very much. Mr. Spencer, Holden's history teacher at Pansy Prep School, who unsuccessfully tries to shake Holden out of his academic apathy. The book is interesting with its various topics and themes. Throughout the novel, Holden seems to be excluded from and victimized by the world around him. As he says to Mr. Spencer, he feels trapped on the other side of life, and he tries to find his way in a world in which he feels he doesn't belong. According to most analyses, The Catcher in the Rye is a novel about a young character's growth into maturity. While it's appropriate to discuss the novel in such terms, Holden Caulfield is an unusual protagonist for a novel because his central goal is to resist the process of growing itself. The phoniness of the adult world, which is probably the most famous phrase from The Catcher in the Rye, is one of the Holden's favorite concepts. It is his catch-all for describing the hypocrisy, pretension, and shallowness that he encounters in the world around him. As with most other things in his life, Holden has ambivalent feelings about religion. Religion attracts him because he thinks it may offer a spiritual anchor in an otherwise confusing and depressing world. He somehow feels that he is inactive, passive, and maybe just because teenager, he pays a lot of attention of his look and other people's looks. The ride takes place sometime in the post-World War II era, either in the late 1930s or early 1950s. These years were a time when the country enjoyed a booming economy and an unprecedented sense of progress, but was also coming to terms with the atrocities of the war, such as the Holocaust and America's atomic bombing of Japan. New York plays a critical role in the book, both reflecting and heightening Holden's emotional deterioration. The city is large and busy, but Holden often feels alone among the crowds. He says, "New York's terrible. When somebody laughs on the street very late at night, you can hear it for miles. It makes you feel so lonesome and depressed."
Skyscrapers that symbolize the size and importance of the Western Hemisphere's greatest metropolis. Business and shopping streets reflect the prosperity of the city, as do the broad avenues lined with tall apartment houses and great hotels, some of them famous around the world.
The book is full of symbols, but I would like to underline some symbols. The Catcher in the Rye. When Phoebe asks Holden what he wants to do with his life, he replies with his image from the song of a catcher in the rye. Holden imagines a field of rye perched high on a cliff, full of children romping and playing. He says he would like to protect the children from falling over the edge of the cliff by catching them if they were on the verge of tumbling over. And of course, maybe you have paid attention to Holden's red hunting hat. This is one of the most recognizable symbols from 20th century American literature. It's inseparable from our image of Holden, with good reason. It's a symbol of his uniqueness and individuality. Museum of National History, the place that he visits quite often. Holden tells us the symbolic meaning of the museum's displays. They appeal to him because they are frozen and unchanging. He also mentions that he is troubled by the fact that he has changed every time he returns to them. The museum represents the world that Holden wishes, the place he could live in. It's a world of his Catcher in the Rye fantasy, a world where nothing ever changes, where everything is simple, understandable, and infinite. And of course, Holden's curiosity and about where the ducks go during the winter reveals a genuine, more youthful side to his character. For most of the book, he sounds like a grumpy old man who is angry at the world, but his search for the ducks represents the curiosity of youth and a joyful willingness to encounter the mysteries of the world. It's a memorable moment because Holden clearly lacks such willingness in other aspects of his life. So, to conclude, Holden is a smart, sensitive guy. All this historical, social context is related to his nature and to his life. Now, after reading the book, I'm really curious about your thoughts. What do you think about those questions? What do you think about the book, about the character? And also, do you feel like Holden? Do you sometimes feel lost? Don't hesitate and try to answer them. And stay healthy and safe and read books.